Hello and welcome. Come on in from the cold out there. Take off your raincoat and cozy up by the warm, glowing, warming glow of the Grog Pod Roguelike podcast, where each episode we use our tools to break open a small, medium, or large rogue style game and deliver it to you, the listeners, for that sweet, sweet amber. I am the Beaver Architect who did a new addition to the Guggenheim, Scott Berger, and currently feasting on biscuits and ale to keep their happiness up for this episode are my co-hosts.
I am a bloodthirsty lizard who just wants to sit by the fire. Your friend, Colin.
I am Andrew Harshman, known for my relatively pleasant aesthetic and exterior, which is hiding a frustrating experience at its core. Will.
Yeah, and this is Will Wright, your armadillo-looking human.
Well, this episode, we are pleased to talk about our Seattle area weather simulator, Against the Storm, released in early access November 1st, 2022, and recently 1.0'd December 8th, 2023. This is a game that you can find on Steam and, interestingly, Xbox Game Pass, but the PC-only version of it, question mark? Makes me wonder if there's plans for console releases in the future. But anyway, it's your PC exclusive episode for today. Against the Storm is brought to us by the developer Aramite Games out of Wrocław, Poland, who I think is another Dead Cells style game dev co-op where it's only 6 people and I think they all pay themselves the same, which is always a fun thing to call out when that happens. And published by Hooded Horse, who have, I think, a pedigree with other kind of city builder type strategy games with some notable entries of Empires of the Undergrowth. I don't know, have any idea how to pronounce this one. Necessi, Necessse. And then last year, or 2022, with Terra Invicta, and then 2023 with Against the Storm. Again, players of this game, your average player of this game, to get a sense of content, has about 80 hours of gameplay in it.
It's only been out for like a month.
Yeah, suffering from some blight rot here. Yeah, this we'll get into it. This game has got some dedicated fans and some deep content to it. So and that's just the average. Like the 90th percentile is like 300 plus hours. So and Against the Storm rolls in on our popularity rankings at the 50th most popular roguelike with 21,836 total reviews. The listeners are at maximum impatience with my stats ramblings. How would you describe Against the Storm in one sentence to calm them down?
Oh man, one sentence here. It's a what? An extraordinarily aggravating city builder. I don't know. That's the one sentence. Yeah, that's what it is.
Perhaps it's some kind of art piece. Maybe it's like this meta piece of content where you're supposed to be managing your, villagers' mood, and in reality, you're having to regulate your own emotions and not get too aggravated. At least that was part of my experience. But seriously, what is it, folks? I haven't played a lot of city builders. It is a city management, worker management game set in a semi-whimsical, semi-unique fantasy world
with roguelike elements.
With the
which is
absolute, let us underline, I didn't get that far in the game, but like roguelike, the fact that I'm not even, I'm on a podcast about roguelikes, so obviously I'm invested to some extent, but like
you're an expert.
I would, if there was like when the gamer, like the great schism happens and we all have to divide up into our chosen game genres of choice and fight to the death. Like I'm throwing my lot in with, FPS, like meatheads, like easy day one. I do not like, I don't feel like being a roguelike gamer is at the core of my identity. But when you said that this was the 50th most popular, I felt like a little bit of ooh boy, anger just boiling up. Like what
Well,
an affront to
it's
roguedom.
it's an
This is
important
barely a roguelike.
it's an important uh measurement of nuance in that the way that data set is built and ranked is if any game on Steam is tagged with
Oh sure,
even
yeah.
one tag, so it gets up on there. But
Gotcha. Nonetheless, it is a startling. That's a startling statistic to me.
I mean, so let's start off with people like this game a lot.
A
It's
lot.
Universal acclaim,
Well, near universal after
etc.
this episode.
I think what is it? It's overwhelmingly positive on Steam. I
No
think.
way. There's no way.
it is very highly
Sorry.
rated, not even just on Steam,
Recent
but
reviews
like
very positive, overwhelmingly positive for all reviews. So like many people like this game. We are going to be the outliers on
yeah.
this review.
And I did not expect to have to break out the Grog Pod disclaimer mobile for this one with a bright red neon sign that's buzzing that says all devs go to heaven and it's okay to like or
Yay.
not like a game.
Yay.
I thought for sure,
Great mottos.
especially after our Tome episode, where I'm like, you know what? Will had a rough go. We're gonna pitch him an underhanded softball with this one. It's got city building. It has roguiness stuff in it. Yeah, and it has beavers. What more does Will want? Harpies? It's got everything on the tin that we could be going for. And I think as we were putting in our rankings just before hitting that record button, I was like, ooh, I'm glad that this game is really jiving it for some people, but yeah, this may have been a whiff on our part. But we're dedicated to the listeners who submitted us to cover this episode. We're gonna
I'm not. Maybe Scott is.
I'm glad we played it. I think it was an interesting game, and I'm excited to talk about it with you guys. I've been holding back in this past week because I didn't want to blow all of the talking points because I wanted to talk about it with you then, but I'm excited to get into it.
Because and it's interesting because I think most of us, Andrew maybe being the odd man out this week, but most of us having a pretty decent affinity for Civ, maybe I guess 4X games in general, although I'm not sure. Well, anyway, Factorio, we're all pretty big Factorio heads. StarCraft, Warcraft, it's definitely Andrew's camp.
Frostpunk, which I feel like is the most similar game to this. I mean, I put in 20 hours of that game, like not a huge amount, but like I played it through and enjoyed it.
And surely taking all of those games and putting them into a big Vitamix blender and hitting that unpause button and having go, surely the end result would be some kind of delicious slurry that we would all enjoy, right?
Not quite, and we're gonna talk about why.
Well,
I think who wants to lead us off.
Well, okay, so maybe I always like
the story so far, perhaps.
Yeah, like so the story
a positive
in this game, note. I think this game starts on a very interesting note where you boot it up and you're greeted with this very kind of tantalizing tutorial and tutorial and cinematic sequence where it's like, you have like this very cool sequence of like storms and this very deeply nice narrator voice who's not suffering from cold that says, the world is plagued by the blight storm, a vile cycle of destruction ravaging everything in its path. The only safe haven is the smoldering city where mysterious scorched queen reigns. And then it goes on to say, you are one of her viceroys, a pioneer sent out into the wilds, tasked with establishing new settlements and acquiring valuable resources for the crown. Your goal in this game is to help rebuild the smoldering city and secure the future of the queen's subjects. That kind of starts us off, and I think right after that, it drops you right into the first tutorial, almost seamlessly. And it's like
the first of many tutorials.
I mean, I only played 2, so.
And Andrew, you must have played that tutorial a few times.
I I will. Let's get into this a little later. The tutorial experience. Let's maybe stay on topic with the
Okay.
story. But importantly, this world is populated by a coalition of multiple humanoid races. You got your normie, boring ass humans, and then you've got the other core people presented are the beaver folk and the lizard folk, and later the harpy folk, and then it's unclear to me exactly what flavor of person the queen is, but her aesthetic is that of a raven or a crow, and so it's kind of, if I sat down at a convention for a one shot and I was presented with the setting of this game, I'd be like, oh, this is interesting, this is cool, this is novel, this is not your standard fare. So yeah, what I think one of the strongest points of this game is the setting, IMO.
But at the
And
same time, I feel
yes.
like this game, like that's it in terms of the story. It's just like you're kind of like dropped this info bomb at the beginning. You're like, okay, great. Like I'm excited to go out on my mission to do this thing, and then maybe like
Well,
90 minutes of tutorials later, I'm like, what am I supposed to be doing again?
yeah. All right. Real question. Scott, I know you got the furthest in this game. Did you do any of the seals? Did you unlock anything?
I did, yeah. I put
Does anything change after that? Because I'm like one mission away from being able to do it, and I don't know if I'm gonna get to that. So
do you
give me those
how
spoilers.
how mad do you want to be? Yeah,
Um,
I'll spoil you. So
all right,
when
close your ears for spoilers.
yeah, I think the screenshot that I had to go back and find like the actual thing that happened because uh I had quote beaten the game, I guess, with the first quote boss, and I was like, okay, is that it? Like something must have happened. Some like kind of narrative catharsis or something with like how much effort has been put into like the setting and world building and like lore question mark. The end game screen for this after you finish up a seal, which we'll get to in a minute, is there's like a little walrus portrait in the corner and it says seal reforged exclamation mark. It's done. The sealed ones are imprisoned once again. Thank you, Viceroy. You not only have saved our world, but also rekindled the flame of hope in our people. The faith in something that until now was only a legend of old. And then you hit the button to say reset or like the storm or season or something. And then the storm, the titular blight storm, comes in and annihilates all the settlements that you've put down. And you're back at square one again. Like
I'm sorry. Am I to understand that they copied their homework from like an NES victory screen? That's awful.
and I feel like it would, well, yeah, I don't know if it's different for any of the higher level seals,
Let's
but
assume yes, but like how many players are going to see that?
I mean, I have 20 hours in this game, and I have only cleared the bronze hurdle seal. Uh, to go, I have well now I have the opportunity to reforge either the bronze or lead seal, and after the lead comes silver, and then gold, and then platinum, and then you guessed it, folks, cobalt, and then
Ooh.
titanium, and finally the final boss of this game,
Zinc.
the zinc. What would we do in a world without zinc? No, adamantine is the final one.
Ooh.
And that is, and so
each with their own exciting new README document worth of victory text. Wow.
Yeah,
I mean,
think
those are those completing the game, or is that like the equivalent of ascension levels in Slay the Spire or other
it's
long running?
I feel like it's kind of both because this game is sort of weird in the sense that you're dropped in on this like hexagonal board to say, okay, here's your starting city in the middle. That's where all of your meta progression upgrades are, where you can go and upgrade like, oh, now you can get this building, or your workers will move 5% faster, or now you can unlock this other more advanced game system or things like that. And you're expanding out from there in a pretty linear fashion of like, all right, it took me also an embarrassingly long time to figure out like what is my goal exactly? Like what should I be doing here?
I had a similar issue.
And so your basically your meta goal is you build cities out in more or less a straight line from the center village to try to get to one of these giant like it's a cool effect on like this game board. It's like this big glowing spheroid thing. You're like, ah, cool. Like there's the goal. I gotta go there and I've got to like start a settlement there. And when you do so, you enter the city building phase and you eventually like uncork one part of the forest, like, there's where one of the sealed ones are, and they're trying to get out. And you complete the mission to lock them back in, and then boom, you're done. And then you hit the reset button, and you can do it again at a higher ascension level.
Like the rest of the game, the presentation is very good, and like it's cool that there's like this overworld and that there is like this sense of progress as you build town after town. If one was lucky enough to make more than one successful town, I wouldn't know anything about that. Nearly 6 hours, and I have yet to get a victory, which is unfortunate for me. But that overworld is neat, and it's unfortunate to hear that.
Is it neat?
It's kind of.
Is it neat? I gotta push back on it. Is it anything?
It could be neat. It could be. It's a neat idea, I think.
I mean, I'm gonna lump this in with the Citadel, as in I'm gonna lump in all of the things that are outside of the specific build the settlement game. I think I might have the opposite opinion. I find the city building part of it, if you were building one single city, I think it's an okay game. I think it's everything else around it that kind of is tedious. It's like, cool, you're building a city in a straight line. Like, was there any interesting parts of picking where to build a city? It could have just been click next, and it would have been the same experience for me.
Right. I think there's
and you're going into the Citadel where you get the upgrades. It's like, cool, plus 1% chance that your worker gets double resources. I cannot care less about that because less than that is 0%. It's the minimum bare, like, those are, I'm not excited about upgrades like that.
Indeed. In a roguelike, I look for interesting meta progression upgrades. I look for interesting run modifiers. And in my 6 hours of playing this game, just under 6 hours, 5.8, I think, didn't encounter a lot. And so when I heard from Colin that the meta progressions were a lot of plus 2% to X or Y, it was just like, oh no. And is there a term for this? Is there a Al Pacino from Heat, don't waste my motherfucking time, meta progression upgrade term?
Well, yeah, because
like,
we see this with some other games, right? Where it's like, oh, I've grinded for 10 hours and I finally was able to upgrade the thing to make my character run 5% faster. But like, would you actually notice that? There's gotta be some kind of phrase of like not grade or
not grade. I like that.
Where like kids would call it a mid grade.
Ooh,
perhaps.
mid-grade.
Scott, you did mention though that you unlock new buildings at the Citadel,
I mean,
so that's neat.
Some of them do things. So like it was like upgrade.
Oh, if that's the case, then like just boil it down to like, not every upgrade tree needs to be the path of exile, like path tree. Like like let's just chill out. Like you can have less stuff and more impactful. Make them less things that are more impactful, basically. Oof.
Okay, so I think like
we've talked about the actual game.
Yeah, I think like the actual city building part of this game, once you get it, is really good. But there is that caveat of once you get it, because man, I did the first tutorial and I think I followed like kind of every step, but it's such a very different experience than your standard StarCraft build order, go into the menu, find the building, okay, put that down, and then I have to go and get some upgrade currency, and that allows me to build the second tier thing. Like I was bouncing between this and Halo Wars. Uh, and like just to kind of see like, well, like similar kind of like a very different style of RTS ishness, and comparing that to like Factorio's tutorials and everything. I'm like, yeah, this Against the Storm is a very different experience than kind of anything we've seen before. Maybe to its detriment, but I think it tries to go for the fences with really trying to push on roguiness from a city builder perspective. And like city builder stuff like Civ, like Factorio, it's very static, right? You have static tech trees, you have static things that you pick from. And how do you go about solving that problem of, well, it's just the same stuff every time is what it's trying to go after.
Well, the Civ has like just these sort of emergent gameplay where the actual dynamics of the politics, it's very like you have to adjust to the various scenarios. This game, I've been quiet, and the reason is because I tell you what, I got less than 2 hours into this game. So if by all means you can say that my evaluation here is way wrong, that I needed to put 10 hours in before I love it, but a game's got to have a hook. A game has to like get and for me, there was no hook. The city, that aspect that you're talking about, the city building, like what makes it roguelike, well, or roguelite, I should say, is just the groves, as far as I can tell. The groves, which is in my view, an incredibly stupid mechanic. I fucking like, as soon as they told me this is how the game works. You clear forests with like these choppers to like open up an area. As soon as you carve a straight path in through the woods into this thing, then you unlock some kind of random event essentially. And I'm just looking at the overworld, the map, and all these groves of like these mystery areas, and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Like this as a structure for like a place. Like, why are there all these unexplored areas? Why do I have to chop a tree down in order to like see what's beyond it? Like, you can walk through a forest. Like, that's just like a very like, I understand that like that's just the way the game works, but like it just doesn't make sense. Why
I don't know, some of the bramble in my backyard. Some of the bramble in my backyard you cannot walk through. You got to chop your way through that for sure.
But even so, the roguelike element, or like this whole like random stuff, as you expand out, and you just got to chop some trees down and build in really awkward ways to accommodate the minimum amount of clearing. It's just I don't know. It was all tedious chores. It didn't feel fun.
The other aspect that adds the roguelike element in is what buildings you get.
Yeah. It's really great at the beginning of every one of my runs.
Of it.
Yeah, sure.
But sorry, go on, Andrew.
Oh, I was just gonna say, at the beginning of all my runs, the game randomizes itself to screw me over in different ways.
Yes.
Like, oh yeah, give me that plantation, rock and roll. I'm gonna start early. I'm gonna have a great crop season. The whole town run didn't see a single piece of fertile soil, and that could have been because I picked a train spot on the overworld that I didn't understand. That like there is none there. But yeah, different buildings. It's always a new surprise what building you won't have access to that is crippling. Is derailing your entire situation. I'm sure if I had 20 hours in, I wouldn't fall prey to that as much.
In my
but I
notes
agree
about this game, I have never excited about something new, only annoyed I didn't have something. I feel like that's my problem. Like every time I saw the buildings, I'm like, wait, is this something that I can do? Or I'm like, oh, finally, thank God. It was never like, ooh, I'm excited about this cool new weapon that I get to try out. Right. It's only like, finally, my economy can stop being broken and I can build fabrics that not at the makeshift crafting house, and like
we can stop being a jerky based fashion and food economy. We can finally clothe our folks in actual fabric instead of lengths of Oberto.
I think one of the I think one of the hindrances there also is that there's buildings that depend on others from a supply chain sequence perspective.
Yeah,
where it's like the game doesn't explicitly tell you that there's like your tier 1 tech and your tier 2 tech buildings. Like coming back to like a StarCraft example, like here's all the buildings that you can build with just minerals, and then here's the buildings you can build with minerals and gas. And there's some of the gas related buildings that are dependent on the mineral ones. But it's like if if you just took your total suite of playing cards and like threw half of them out, but you still had some of like the tier 2 tech buildings in your hand that you couldn't do anything with because your tier 1 building didn't exist in that build sequence. It's like, well, don't give me the option to pick it then, right? I mean, am I thinking about this right? Where, I feel like I had multiple times where I'm playing through, I'm like, okay, do I want this for later? Well, I can't do
Yeah.
anything with this now, but
You're just
maybe I'll get,
hoping.
yeah, like maybe I'll get the building that is like earlier in the production sequence later, which seems backwards to me. It feels like you could totally do that random draw from like your tier 1 buildings and then say, okay, once you have those tier 1 buildings established, random draw from the ones that are tier 2 off of that.
It's like Rogue Tower where you have to pick the
Right? Yeah.
lower
Rogue
card and then you get
Tower.
access to the upgrades.
Oh,
Now
wow.
there was a fun game. Oh, what a time I had in a genre that I couldn't give a crap about. Same thing with this genre. I couldn't give two beavers pelts off of a I don't
You're
know
skinning your citizens,
something
Andrew?
something. There is a cannibalism option where you get it's a blueprint, I think. No, it's a blueprint. No,
Cornerstone?
not blueprint, a cornerstone, excuse me, my
Yeah.
mistake. Um
How dare you?
but like city builders and sorry, what was I saying? Anyway, the point I was trying to illustrate was that Rogue Tower I thought was fun in a genre that I don't care about, and then this is another genre I don't care about, and I had the opposite experience. Anyway, Colin, going way back, and I think this speaks to. I just wanted to bring up a point, one of many points I think that will be brought up about the UI that we are discussing currently. The you never had were excited to get a new thing. You were either disappointed or relieved. I was playing the game like 30 minutes ago while blasting the soundtrack to Scarface. I'm like, come on, I can get one win. I can do it 3 times speed. I'm like channeling all my like RTS skills. Like, let's go push it to the limit. It was like the push it to the limit montage, except if only if like Al Pacino had gotten out of the van and immediately gotten just hit by a car and splattered across the roadway, because my last run was probably the worst of them all. But anyway, so okay, the bluestone, pardon me, the blueprint option comes up and it says, hey, here are some new buildings. This I think is a very tangible example of problems with the UI. Of course, I'm looking at the blueprints. I'm trying to achieve my orders so that I can complete the town successfully. There's no way to reference your orders while you are in the blueprint menu.
Right.
But
You
to
have to just
close the
exit
blueprint
out.
menu, open the orders, look through those, very quickly commit to memory like what my goals are. Okay, then go back to the blueprint, and then it's just like,
Right. Do I have to
why
build
have you
it?
done this to me?
This
Game?
this order goal subquest requires luxury goods, which requires wine. This building does something. Does it wait to go back in, check if I have something that does this? Like, you need a production tree on the side every time you're trying to make a decision, because like, yeah, you get some of those orders where you just can't finish them because you didn't draw the right building.
Mhm. Well, I think like also this game tries to solve that boxed in problem by maybe being too flexible, because you have in your city building experience, uh, you have your death timer that's increasing, which is the queen's impatience, and if that like that's a red meter that fills up like at a continuous rate, and if it gets to the full thing, then the queen's had enough of it. And you know what? You're fired from this uh, city planning exercise.
You are no longer the viceroy. You're just a
right.
regular Roy.
And to mitigate that, you can fulfill the queen's orders, which are little, again, more randomized objectives that come in sort of piecemeal over time. And you crack it open, you're like, well, okay, I think it gives you a choice of like which one you want to do, and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I'll pick this one. I think I have the stuff to do this, maybe. If you remember what buildings you have, and if you complete that, then you get reputation, which I think this is a clever thing where like as the impatience meter increases and you fulfill those objectives, that meter slides over to the other side for the reputation meter. And if you max that out for your main gameplay loop, then you win. You win the city building exercise. So it not only decreases that, but it increases your good score meter at the same time, which is, I think, a really satisfying thing when you get this good domino effect going of like, oh man, okay, I've solved that one, and I wound up solving like 3 or 4 orders a long time ago, but they were blocked. So now I can like click, 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 and the meter just goes like all the way to the left. And it's like, oh, that feels so satisfying. And you unlock all these options simultaneously. I think there's the other way that you can build that good points meter is by making your citizens blissed out of their minds with biscuits and pie and jerky, and making sure that they don't flip their shit when it gets rainy out. Your standard Seattle experience, basically. So when
Huddle in by the fire inside your cave.
exactly, and crucially, the fire and like town building experience part of it, I think, again, I've kind of had that third eye awakening moment of like, oh my God, I think I finally understand this game after 20 hours of playing it. I can get why people find it popular and good, because when you get that series of dominoes to fall in line, or if you can't, if you're boxing, you're like, shit, I can't complete these objectives in time. Like I don't want to fail as this meter's increasing. All right, well, I'm just gonna wait for, or like get the trader here and sell, 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 buy, 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 and like get all of the candy that I can for all of my people, and make them like as happy as possible until like the critical threshold is passed. Oh, okay, I've won. Great. Right as the demon monster like spawns out from the other side of the map and is like shooting lasers and killing people, you're like, well, my job here is done. Time to go start a new city.
That is, we might be unearthing as we are making our way through this impenetrable forest, through these groves, is discovering new glades. We might be uncovering a theme, an underlying issue that exists with this game, where that is another example. Like you're just trying to get the bar up high enough so that you can like jump ship. That's like keep your people just happy long enough, and it's like, yeah. Oh, cool, like some kind of weird like but anyway, what I was going to say is that is something that kind of strains credulity in like the game setting. Same thing with like the glades. Like, why is the forest impenetrable? Why can't we just walk to the glade? Same thing with like the queen's impatience. It's like, that's a neat mechanic, but like the idea that like, oh, she's just like generally annoyed at you, and that's why you have to abandon all of these people to starvation. It's like there's a lot of stuff in the flavor of the game and the story of the game that strains credulity. It's like, why would that be a thing? I don't know.
And once you go to the next city, your old city's fine. It stays there forever. It was like that city was like on the edge of collapse, but I just squeaked it out. Like, no, the second you leave, it's fine. Maybe the guy who's running that city after I leave should be the one who's actually doing the exploring.
The mayor. I'm just a viceroy.
Yeah. The viceroy, just has to hang out long enough to get over the finish line, and then that's it.
I think I have a solution
please,
to some of our woes, which might mostly stem from the non-city building part. And I think I was talking about this in the Discord a few days ago about our Omega Bowl 1 winner game, FTL, Faster Than Light, where combat in that game is not the only thing that you do. And in this game, city building is the only thing that you do effectively. I think the solution here is if Against the Storm, like the city building was like a core crucial component, but not the only one. And that as you're expanding out from the main city, again, like if you kind of think of it through the lens of like the FTL mode, you're expanding away from the rebel fleet, you're expanding away from the storm, maybe, and that you're encountering story quests, you're unraveling like the lore of the game is you're going around, you're encountering traders, you're exploring the like that kind of FTL style like map system or Slay the Spire map system, I think has been aped by so many games because it works so well. And
Yeah.
I'm not super convinced that like the hexagonal grid expansion in this game really works because there's no real incentive to, how like in Civ, like you can decide like, oh, I'm gonna like greedily expand my Alexander campaign all the way across in a linear fashion, go grab this city state so no one else can grab it. And you have like the super long extendo empire versus like a Venice one that's like very small and compact. Like in Against the Storm, you have the same kind of hexagonal like grid system, but there's no incentive to like build your cities like in a circle around the forbidden place at the center, right? Your goal is to expand in a linear fashion out to the seal to beat it. Like there's no real point in like arcing or like snaking back. And I know that like on higher difficulties there is, because it's like, oh, if I go, you have more time, uh because crucially the point of beating the seals is to give you more time to beat more seals, uh, which I'm not super thrilled about as like a hook. But at the same time, like my thought for this was, if you had an FTL style, just like node and edge map where, okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go here, story beat, done in like 30 seconds. I'm gonna go over here. Uh, Merchant adventure. Okay, great. And then, okay, now I've come to the city building thing. This is the combat in Slay the Spire. This is the combat in FTL.
But a combat in one of those lasts for what, 5 minutes, 10 minutes at most?
Right.
Building a city here is an hour to 2 hours at minimum. So like your story beat to city building would be like a 95% ratio towards city building. Um, I mean, so like my problem is less that like if you want to have it just be city building, that's fine. You can do that. But within a run, what is a run? Is it a single city or is it getting all the way to the seal? Because there doesn't feel like there's that much like linking your cities together. Like you can trade with the ones behind you after you get the next one, but it's not like it really gives you much of an advantage. And how you did or what you built in your first city doesn't have that much of an effect. Like I don't feel like you're progressing within a run. It's like
Mhm.
a couple of independent cities that happen one after the other. But like City 2 versus City 3 are, it's like, oh well, one's starting in a forest and one's starting in a different kind of forest. They're basically like fundamentally the same game. You're
Mm.
doing the same loop, and there's not enough variation between them, or progression within a run or whatever. Like it's just kind of like cool, you're playing it again.
Yeah, and once you so there's a thing also here that might work better as maybe the main game sequence. And that's when let's see if I remember this right. I think if you beat the adamantine seal, which is prestige 20, ascension 20 effectively,
Wow.
uh you unlock something called the Queen's Hand trial, which is, to this point we've been saying that like, you expand a city out from the main center hub, and you go through the sequence of city building, and you will either succeed or fail. And uh I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you fail, like that city is like still there on the map and has some sort of, I don't know, like adjacency bonus or something that influences like your placement of the next thing. So there's that kind of like light build up element as you go on. But the Queen's Hand trial is like it's permadeath mode. It is, if you fail once, you fail that whole string of sequences. And I almost wonder if like, I don't know if that's better. It feels like that's kind of what this game wants to be. And like get rid of all the meta upgrades and just make it like, as you progress further towards like the seal, and it should just be a seal, I'm to Will's point about talking like this is our weekly Slay the Spire sequence, but for how much Will talks about Slay the Spire being the greatest game ever created, I was writing down so much of my notes for this game, like, well, it should just take this thing from Slay the Spire. It should just take this thing from Slay the Spire also.
This
You
game
don't
should
even
just
like
be
Slay the
Slay the
Spire that
Spire.
much, which is the best
I
part.
love
because I think like if you have this like central starting node and you're like building cities out and it's like you're getting more of your tech tree enabled the further you get out, and then by the time you're at that final seal you have all of your like more complex game mechanics ready to go, you have all of your trade networks with your previous cities ready to go, and you're like, all right, I'm ready to take on this final boss, let's do it. And then you beat that final boss and you're like, all right, I've like that was it, I've beaten the storm, I've finally pushed everything back, I've saved the land for all of the beavers, we can now live in happiness and peace. Like that's what I want. That's what I want out of this game. But instead it's like a reset button, like, okay, congrats, you beat it. Press the button to have the storm come back in and kill everyone. Yeah, I think like there's no heart, like not no pun intended, but there's no like big boss heart. There's no Spire heart to this game of this is your big bad that you have to go and fight and beat, and when you beat them, this is something that I feel like I can narratively be accomplished with.
I agree completely. I think there's such a huge opportunity there to like take this idea of the queen and have some kind of big twist at the end where instead of this her being like wanting to expand the empire, maybe that was the evil entity all along. And I don't know, just you can work something in here to make it so that there's a big build up to a big fight or a big town growth session. I don't know.
Sure.
It's not very epic. Can we talk for a second about the art?
Sure.
I kind of like the art in this game. Although I feel like
that
So
position.
check
Why
it
was
out.
that?
It looks like World of Warcraft. It looks like Warcraft 3.
There you go.
And whether you like it or not, it resonates with a lot of people. Like World of Warcraft was able to survive on looking basically the same for like over a decade. And that's because for a lot of people, it's like it walks this fine line of being like a little bit cartoony, a little bit stylized, but still kind of grounded and a little bit gritty, a little bit cool, and it kind of it's stylized enough that it is not ravaged by the passage of time. And personally, it works for me. In this particular game, I think the graphics and the sound are really great and are probably the couple of things I enjoy without any caveats.
And yeah, I'm definitely not a Warcraft player. I'm definitely much more of a StarCraft homeboy, but like I feel like this aesthetic has been growing on me over time. Where like I definitely didn't play WoW, but like this kind of like very fantastical, fantasy, but like edgy kind of fantasy to it. I feel like it works for this game specifically. I feel like if this game was more like big robots and like Warhammer style aesthetic, I'm not sure if it would work as well. But yeah, I mean, I feel like it's fine. It's a neutral positive for me.
Go Will.
Would it be accurate to
wait? Let Will go.
All right, sorry.
It.
Please.
I mean, I'm a strong negative here. It's repulsive to me. It's part of the reason. Like, I mean, I got an hour and a half in or whatever, and then I'm like, okay, I'm in the middle of the second tutorial. I can't take it anymore. I open the game up again. I'm greeted with these graphics. I'm greeted with the why the fuck am I doing this? Like, sort of like, and I'm just like, all that comes together into like, no, I just immediately Alt F4, and then that happened multiple times. But like this art style really it hurts me. I don't know what about it in particular. I think I could probably analyze it, we could figure it out exactly, but like there's just something grotesque about the all of the just how I think everything just looks like it's got too much in it. It's just like all the mass of something usual, and then you just expand it out. Everything's just getting like, I don't know, bulky and disgusting. I didn't even know the humans were humans for the longest time there, because they look like I started this out with like armadillos, like these characters,
little units running around.
Yeah, the little units running
Right,
around,
you're
they
talking about
look so stupid.
the
And
actual
I don't understand,
models.
why are beavers getting along with dinosaurs, getting along with humans? Like this, this is a fairy tale world where you could have any species working all together in harmony, but
Also,
like,
if you look at
what?
the unit portrait, have you looked at the unit portrait of the lizard dinosaur men? They've
Yeah.
got a terrible goatee.
Wait,
I'm
do
looking at
they?
it right now,
Oh, hell
and
yeah, they do.
it's it's deeply
Dogs and
bad.
cats living together. Um,
Turn this
you
into
know,
Factorio. Give me Factorio graphics, and I'm feeling a lot better about this game. But
The
I
grungy, metallic, oily.
yeah, it's not high resolution. There's no special. In fact, it would probably take way fewer assets in order to create, or like less expense to create less detailed assets to make it a Factorio style, and it would be better. And so it's just like, why wouldn't you just go that route instead of like designing all these ridiculous, stupid, ugly buildings and people and environments?
I get where you're coming from. I mean, I think it's just it is a known quantity. This is a known style of artwork that works for a lot of people. It resonates with a lot of gamers.
I mean,
And I think thematically, it's like when you're going to design this fantasy game, it's like, well, what are our options for an indie studio of 6 people who are all getting to pay the same thing? Good on you, by the way. Um, well, we can do this tried and true thing that a lot of people like, and um, unfortunately, you're just by luck of the draw, don't happen to be one of those people. Will
I know
and I don't
taste is
love
hard to
it.
come by these days. What can I say?
I mean,
To be clear, I'm not fanatical about it, but like I think it's a pretty, for me, I would describe this game as like cozy core. Like
Hmm.
it's a cozy gaming experience. And I think the graphics are pretty work with that coziness factor for
Not
me
quite gnome
personally.
core though.
I understand why. Like, I don't really like the graphics, but I'll repeat my line of I can't really give a negative score to graphics. Once it gets below a certain goodness level, I just stop seeing it. Um, but like I understand why developers gravitate towards this style. It makes it easier to differentiate things. So like it's this style, though, like it's not chibi, but like bigger heads, bigger icons, more
Exaggerated.
exaggerated, yeah, proportions of stuff. It makes it super easy to see like what this building is versus this building, or like what this dude is versus this dude. It's like, well, yeah, we could have just all like various slightly different versions of humans, and they'll look basically the same, which would be maybe more realistic, but it would be harder to differentiate them from a glance. And so you go into a style like this where it's like, yeah, you can build something that like I didn't love the rest of the UI, but I was able to tell the buildings apart. So you got
I was
that.
not. And maybe that's one
Okay.
of my problems
No,
of
I
why I'm
think
so bad at this game.
I was in the same bucket. Even on like the final boss fight of the bronze seal, like I was routinely getting different building types like misappropriated where I'm like, okay, I need bricks to do this thing. Where can I find bricks? Frantically scrolling around the
Well, I
map.
bet it's under a tent somewhere, or
Theoretically, you could tell them apart.
And
I hear you.
crucially, well, the actual solution to this is that like most of the building like shapes and sizes and like colors of the tops, like it's like if you had played StarCraft for the first time, you're like, God, all these buildings are just like metal spears and they just all look the same. And like I can't tell the difference between my barracks and an academy. But like, if you're one of those people who's had like 80, 100 hours in this game, like, yeah, obviously you're going to know what the difference between your wood cutting cart is and what your kiln is. But for us, like that's like, and for me in particular, like on that final boss fight, I was routinely fumbling between them. And we haven't talked about it yet, but I've been routinely using the recipes panel as a crutch for like this is where my face is for like most of the game. And that is the thing
Yeah.
like you bring up and you're like, okay, I need this ingredient, but what is the thing that makes this ingredient and what consumes it? And once you grok it, there's a very nice panel that you can search for bricks, and it will bring up the list of buildings that you have available that you've randomly drawn in this run that can make bricks. And then you can say, all right, well, I'd like to either find where this is on the map, or like click and be able to like put it down immediately. And I think like part of that aspect of clicking on the thing and being able to build it like in 2 steps is really solid, and being able to see like there's like a little slider allows you to see like, oh, this is all the stuff that consumes bricks, which is helpful. Um, and like that like menu system has been like kind of the focal point of how I've been building a lot of stuff in my successful runs, which like I'm surprised that Andrew, like you haven't like really passed a lot of your city building runs, which, not to brag or anything, but I was like uh
I think you mean
It
to say
concerns
any
me,
of my
Andrew.
city building runs.
like
Um,
I hadn't failed any of mine, and I was like, is this game too easy? Like, to admit it, and admittedly, like all of my runs came down to like the wire where like the impatience meter was almost totally full, and then I just like domino affected all of the rep stuff like right at the end. Or I was like, all right, well, I know I can just like go into like these smaller glades and just like break open some of these caches for rep. All right, well, I'm gonna wait for the trader to come in, buy like all their tools out, and then just like crack all these things like simultaneously. It did come down to the wire for a lot of them, but I don't think I failed any of my cities for that whole seal run.
well, interesting. I wouldn't say this is an attack on my gaming skills, but it feels adjacent to that. One hex over. No, real quick, I will address this topic. But first, the recipes menu. Interesting. We talk a lot about roguelikes that we don't like it when a game requires you to have the wiki open in a separate tab. What do we think
Mhm.
about games where the wiki is just built into the game? Is that better or
I
worse?
think it's better.
It's probably better, so you don't have to alt tab.
Yeah.
I should have used that maybe. All right, so let me break it down for you real quick. Here was my experience. So, the week that we picked this game, I sat down with the tutorial. Little did I know it was tutorial number 1. And it was kind of late, and I played through it, and I was like, all right, well, this seems like, fine. This seems like pleasant enough. I like the rain sound effects. I like the presentation. And then I did the first tutorial. I didn't realize it was one of multiple tutorials. I then started the second tutorial and was like, whoa, I don't have time tonight to do another tutorial. Okay, thank you very much. Or tutorial part 2, whatever it was. So then I left the game alone for like a week. Came back, hit continue or play or whatever. And then it dropped me back into what I didn't realize was tutorial number 2. I thought that it had reset my tutorial progress. And I was like, forget that crap. I'm not replaying that garbage. Give me a break. So I skipped that. So basically, I went into my first couple of city building attempts with only the first tutorial under my belt and like 0 city builder experience. I played Skylines for like a weekend, and that was fun.
God.
Like I just sat down and just like had a fun casual time for like 4 hours. It wasn't even a weekend, it was like an evening. And I was like, wow, that was fun. That was a good old time. Like it made sense to me. The UI seemed grokkable. And I was at like no point frustrated or confused or anything. And that's what I thought I was getting myself into, like a city builder / like black and white
You need another
experience.
300 hours into Factorio.
Hey, there you go. So yeah, so like the first couple of town attempts that I did, like I didn't even know that you could substitute ingredients. I didn't know that until like today, and it was like kind of a footnote in the second tutorial when I decided, all right, let me go back and actually play the second tutorial,
which is like
that.
Basically like the core game mechanic of the city building experience, you would
Indeed
think.
So part of that's on me. The other part of it is like the player experience was that was my player experience. Like that was my I went back and screenshot it because I was like, am I tripping? Like I thought it reset my tutorial progress. And I went back and checked, and both tutorials start with more or less the same screen. Like the text is slightly different. So in my defense, it was reasonable for me to think that I was back at tutorial 1. And it might have been foolish of me to be like, well, I'm going to skip the tutorials from now on. I know enough. But like, again, don't waste my time, game. Like,
yeah, I mean, again, you're not totally out of base, because I was doing the 4th tutorial for learning how blight rot works, and being able to use rain punk, which, word of the day, excellent
Rain
word.
punk.
But like But in that tutorial, this was after I had beaten the bronze seal also. So you would think that like me with 20 hours of game experience would know this. But I was like, I don't know, I was maybe like 45 minutes into the tutorial. I had to save and quit. And then I came back to it uh today or yesterday. And I had that same exact experience. I'm like, did my progress save at all? And I wrote down a bullet point in my Google Doc of like Rainpunk tutorial, progress not saved, 5x or 5 exclamation marks. But I deleted it because I was like, oh wait, no, this is just where I left off. And it took me like a good 20 seconds to realize, wait, no, this isn't like the starting town. This is just what it looks like.
This is
So
just what it looks like every time in a game that is supposed to be a roguelite with randomized elements. We were bamboozled, at least you temporarily. Well, thank you. That makes me feel a little bit better about like totally goofing and like missing all the core mechanics. But even after I went back and did that, like I have been having just a terrible time navigating this UI. At every turn, I feel like a new challenge is being presented. Like just the way of like reading. I realize StarCraft is very different and it's very simple in comparison. So forgive me, I'm just a simple-minded StarCraft RTS player. But like to me, that like that interface makes sense. It's clear to me when I have the resources that I need. It's clear to me when I can start building a building and not. It's clear to me. I feel like the game, and this could just be a city builder thing I'm not aware of. It does not. It was not. I was not understanding what was happening in the game.
Well, I want to hear. I want to hear Will and Colin's take about how Factorio's UI works so much better for this kind of supply chain logistics problem that we're solving in this game.
Well, I know Colin's got a probably more in-depth analysis, but just like what comes to mind for me.
Absolutely not true.
Oh, way more. I feel like you've talked about it a lot. So maybe I'm sorry. I didn't mean to speak you up that before you talk. But like it's you never have to look at your hands to know like anything you want to do by just like with what's available on with your hands on the WASD. Everything's just like you can just immediately do it. And it's just always the shortest route to like in the fewest and most simple way to get there. And so like if you wanted to like copy a blueprint and paste it or like switch your menu to the second menu to pick like this, it's all like very accessible and it's super easy to learn. It's been a while since I played Factorio, so I don't have like the specifics top of mind, but I know relearning it is just like like riding a bike in many ways.
Indeed. Are there hotkeys for the different weapons? Or the weapons, pardon me, the different classifications of, see, I just want to play an FPS. Are there hotkeys for the different types of buildings?
In this game?
In this game.
But I mean, let me ask you a question. Have you tried clicking Control, Alt, or Shift and see what that does?
Absolutely not.
So that's like half the way you should be playing this game is if you
hold
down Alt, it shows you all of the people in all of your game in all of your buildings. You can scroll through, use the scroll wheel to place and pull other people. Like it doesn't do a good job of explaining its UI, but there is a lot of UI stuff that's in this game. So like and sure. Honestly, like that's why like we talked about it a little bit earlier today on Discord. But I was like, I want to go back and look through all of it because there is a lot of stuff. I think that it does have all of the information laid out in a pretty decent way throughout the game. It just never tells you what it is. You just have to like hover over things and understand how city builders work. And then you'll be like, oh, cool. That little plus there means that this building will add that capability.
And I think
never
part
explains that to you, but once you understand it, you're like, oh, cool, this is actually a pretty useful screen here.
And I acknowledge that a lot of my troubles that I've been having would be solved, you know, if I were to, I don't know, get paid an hourly rate to like sit down and learn this game. But I was just, I don't know, I was very quickly stuck in this cycle of I don't like this game in part because I don't understand it. But I do not want to take any steps to understand it because I don't like it. So it's just like
it does not do a good job of explaining itself.
Exactly.
Okay, all right. I've got a solution here, and we just talked about this with Colin saying the FTL style thing of combat being like 90% of your time investment and like the little story beats being like inconsequential. If this game started with like taking 5 to 10 minutes to beat a city building sequence, and then maybe got to like 10 to 15 minutes for your next one, and then 20 to 25 minutes for the
Yeah.
next one. And then by the time, and like maybe you start on a smaller map, or smaller map size, and then your final boss fight for the seal, you're on like the full map size. You have everything at your disposal. You have all the tools that you've been building up this whole time. You're ready to go. It's the final knockout match. But put on the training wheels when you first load the game. Don't send like people off into traffic on the highway going the wrong direction with all of this crazy horn honking and stuff going on.
And the tutorials aren't great. Like I was like, oh, I should try and do the third tutorial. And it's like, cool, here's a blank city. Here's like the start of a normal game. Like, am I just gonna play a full city now? Like, I'm pretty sure I figured this all out, and I'm just doing the tutorial to like
You're
check
just
the
playing it to
box and make sure I'm
completion,
not missing something. Yeah. And to make that stupid thing on the left side of the screen go away. And it's like, I probably don't need it. I think I understand how this game works, but maybe I don't. I don't know. Like, it should like have the tutorial be integrated into your first run or something like that.
You know who does tutorialization really well is RimWorld.
Do they?
At least from my experience, having
I
played
mean,
it relatively
I don't know. It's been
recently.
too long since I learned how to
Right?
play
Yeah,
it.
like
The same for me.
I
I was
mean,
like, I don't remember that at all.
it does the same thing. It hot drops you like, all right, your game has
Yeah.
started. But like when you encounter something, it's like big flashing yellow symbol in the upper right. It's like click on the thing. This is the
Oh,
text.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna explain how the system works, and this is like go and click on this thing. All right, try it for yourself now. I feel like RimWorld's like in situ tutorial is really good. And on the same side, Colin, I remember you complaining about Factorial's tutorial being
Yeah,
abysmal.
Factorio tutorial is
No,
terrible.
no, no. Well, so I looked at it again today to compare. It's very different and much better because it's like,
they've made it better.
yeah, because I know
Okay.
what old tutorial you're talking about. It's
It was
totally
very
different
bad.
now. And it's very much like a little narrated sequence. I timed it, took you 5 minutes to beat the very first thing. And it's just like, go and chop down some trees. Go and put the wood in the thing to make the box. You got coal now. Great, you're done. Okay, I would like to learn the next thing, please. And like that kind of chunkification and that little small little bite-sized bit, once you like brings you back for more, I think, instead of like, all right, now play a whole game of Factorio and good luck.
100 hours later.
100 hours later. What is real quick? What is the aesthetic? What is the setting of Factorio? I don't know
Unimportant.
anything about it.
Crash
Unimportant?
Crash
Diesel
Just out of
Punk?
curiosity. Oh, diesel punk. All right, interesting. Neat. And all humans.
Industrial core.
None of these beavers. None of these muskrats.
Just one man and
humans.
robots.
One
Bugs.
man
and
who hates
robots.
the
Bugs. There's so
environment.
many bugs.
Oh yeah, and you're fighting bugs.
All right, bugs. We got bugs. Am I to understand?
Yeah, where was the
that-
combat in this game? I want things to come fight you. You needed some combat. You need some tower defense shit in here.
This is what
I
I thought
think
I wasn't
honestly
gonna
that would
like
make
about
it
the
better.
game. But like as it turns out, that was not my biggest issue, the lack of combat.
I mean, I understand where you're coming from, and I think that like I get it, and at the same time, like I think this game tries to sell itself as like the cozy the cozy core city builder where you're not explicitly like killing enemies or anything. I mean, there are things that like you cut open a forest glade and like, oh, you better solve this puzzle in the next 5 minutes, or it's gonna spawn this demon that's gonna start shooting missiles at your little dudes, and like they are dying by the dozen. But oh, look at that! I completed the city. Not my problem anymore. Like there are things that will kill your villagers, in sometimes hilarious fashion. But yeah, I feel like
Defending.
there's no really external threat. I don't think the story does a real good job of like
Right.
saying the reason why you're fighting against the storm is this to
Sure.
do what. So that kind of like antagonistic villain is sort of missing.
I remember when I was a young lad playing one of the Zelda games, and my father commented, "Gosh, this game is so violent. You just attack everything, including the plants, including the pots. You're just destroy, destroy, destroy." And he was kind of goofing around. He was also goofing around when he gave me grief for like shooting a guard who was not aware of my presence, like in GoldenEye, and saying, he was probably just sitting there like thinking about his family. I was looking forward to going home. Anyway, but pardon me, all this to say, I think it's admirable and interesting that this game exists and it's popular and it's fun for a lot of people. And violence is not the core interaction in the gameplay loop.
But it should be.
At no point are you like marshaling like it's not like Age of Empires where you're having to like call back all your villagers and start a militia and go like fight the forest troll or something. And I don't know, I think I kind of like that about this game, that's like fresh and novel, that you're not constantly fighting, because it's not supposed to be an RTS game, right? I just wish it had the UI of an RTS game.
Yeah.
But what kind of combat would you envision in this game, Colin? What were you hoping this game would have?
I don't actually know. It would be a different game if you did that. But do we want to do scores, or do we have anything else we want to talk about?
I think.
And then, did we miss any big categories?
Ooh, I have a snarky bullet point in my Google Doc that says the Scorched Queen doesn't actually exist because you don't see her in the game at all, and that everyone is being gaslit by the Viceroy into saying, "Oh, I'm doing this on behalf of the Queen. Don't worry about it."
I like that.
Yeah, you'll
the
see
Queen
her.
is it's the heart within us all, the beating heart of the game.
Yeah, I think we could probably move on to rankings.
I'll get mine out of the way then, maybe.
Sure.
Please.
All right. Yeah, so I thought a bit about this. Again, like there's probably a bit of variance you can tie around this. But when I look at my rankings and I think of a game like Darkest Dungeon 2, which that was a painful experience for me. I feel like it falls into that category, and I'm going to give it the same score. It's a 4.5 for me, which puts it 26th out of how many have we done at this point?
Done 41 games.
All right, so it's not so high up there for me. And usually, I'll just add this. Usually, I can think of like here are the things like you were talking about to fix the game, but like the very structure of this game, I just I'm not sure. A new game like Colin proposed. That's how you solve this one.
I'll go next. So after having spent the last better more than an hour bashing this game, I feel like perhaps I have not made my opinion of. I actually did enjoy the city building part of it. I found it maybe slightly repetitive to have to do it over again, but I did like the city building loop. And even like I started off putting this game as a 6.5 when we started the podcast, and I bumped it up to 7 while we've been talking about it because I'm like, oh, I'll never play this game again. And I'm like, talking about it again, though, I do kind of want to play it right now after we're done. It's like it's got a little bit of a hook into me, and I think mostly my criticisms are that I'm disappointed because on the surface it looks like a game that I should really like, and a lot of people really do like it. And so I wanted it to be, a 9 or a 10 out of 10. And I don't think it's that. I think there's a lot of stuff in there that is not fully baked. And maybe it could get better. I don't think it's ever going to get up to a 10 out of 10 excellent game for me, but I think it could get up to, I think that with a little bit more dev work on it, and it sounds like they are continuing to do stuff. Like Scott was saying that they're or posted something earlier today on our Discord about how they're adding like a production graph in there. It's like I think that they might get to a point where it's got good UI. I mean, Factorio has been in development for like 8 years, so it's really not fair to say like, well, why isn't it as good as Factorio? It's like, well, Factorio wasn't as good Factorio when it was like 1 month out of release. So I think that the core loop it's got some aspects of it that I like. I do really like playing city building type games. So I understand why people like it. So I'm going to give it a 7.
Well, I sure as heck I'm not going to bookend this episode, so I'm going to go next, if I may. So yeah, it is okay. All devs go to heaven. It is okay to not like a game. It's also okay to like a game. God bless. Raven Queen bless.
Scorched Queen.
Glad that the Scorched Queen. I'm glad that this game, works for a lot of folks. And what the heck does my opinion matter? Listeners, what have I done to offend you? I am sorry. I've maxed out the impatience meter of the listeners. The first episode I was officially on this podcast was a listener choice episode, and it was wonderful. The Last Spell, I thought I was going to be terrible at. I thought I wasn't going to like it because it's not a genre of game that I usually go in for. But it turned into probably my personal game of the year, I got to say. All the games I actually played to completion of last year. Now I didn't play. There are a lot of that's obviously pretty intensely. But again, my personal game of the year. And now we have this listener's choice episode, and it absolutely was not my type of game. It was doomed from the start, probably, and I made mistakes along the way. I sincerely tried, and I was able to get 5.8 hours into it. Basically, if I may, one more brief tale. I remember getting a call when I was a wee lad. Not that wee of a lad. I don't know, it was maybe like a teenager. I got a phone call from my mom, and she said, "Hey, I'm goofing around on the computer, and I see this black and white game. Black and White is a not dissimilar game. It's similar thematically. You're a god, and you're trying to watch over these people. You're managing the mood of your people. It's an RTS game." And she was like, "This seems kind of neat." And you were showing me some of the cinematics and stuff. It's kind of fun. "I'm trying to play this game," she said. And I was trying to remotely walk my mom through playing this game, and she had no idea what she was doing. Like, the very concept of moving the camera was like foreign to her. She never played like a game in her life. And I sometimes reflect on that experience, and I think, wow, like, people's perspective are so different. And I was like, what would it be like to be like my mother, where I have no idea how to play a video game? What a foreign concept. And I now understand exactly what my mother felt like while playing this game. I was bamboozled and confused the entire time, and I accept that a lot of that's on me, but also some of it is on the game. And for me personally, I'm putting this at my third worst game. Obviously very subjective, but like, I would rather play Eldritch. I would rather get Eldritch's notepad ending than the one that you described, Scott.
Oof.
And yeah, it's unfortunate because I went into this episode very optimistic, and I'm sorry, it just ain't my bag.
Well, I guess I'll bring us home here. I'll zoom in on my good bullet points on my Google Doc here. I think this game started really high in my rankings and then tumbled further and further down the longer I played it. Because I think that end game is sorely lacking. I think like Darkest Dungeon 2, I think it has a lot of fixable problems, and I think that if I come back to this game, I don't know, maybe like a year from now, it probably could be like totally different. They've like solved all the things that we've been whining about. But yeah, I think like the weak spots are its end game, the kind of like the meta progression stuff. I think the city building goes on for too long. But I think the good parts, there's a lot of good to be had here. I think the art aesthetic is not for everyone, but I think it's very well done here. I think like the art style for what they're going for, they really nailed it. And for the most part, I like, and I'm not usually a fantasy type person. I think the background music for this game is really good, and I've been like listening to it while coding, and it's very focusing and calming. And like I was having a hard time picking which one to like relaxingly play the episode out with. Yeah, I think like the devs have like clearly been busting their ass building this game. Maybe they just need some time to sit back and polish up some stuff. And I think that like the swing for the fences of making a roguey city builder is not something that we've seen very often. And so it's a welcome sight to see. But B, I think they kind of got it for the most part. It's kind of clunky in some ways, but I think like it kind of works. And I will say, like, when I was really getting into it, and in the later cities that I was building out towards the final boss, like I was super locked in and super in the zone and like really focused. I'm like, all right, I got to do this thing to get this thing and this thing to get this thing. And then when I finally beat it, it was like I needed a pack of smokes to relax afterwards. I'm like, woo. And like as a result, like that kind of tempered my want to immediately start up a new round of like, oh, I gotta do the one more turn thing here of one more city. It was such a like, oh, I finally like cleared that experience. But it was like, but that felt like justified and like, all right, well, I finally beat that thing. It was like a big relief. And I think if the game for me, if it wasn't like really jiving, I wouldn't have been so locked in at the time. So even if it did start really high in my rankings, I think it's like settled in at a reasonably good spot. I'm gonna give it a 7.8, which ties it with Griftlands. I think Griftlands has a similar kind of thing where like, yeah, like, like the main thing that you do in the game is good and like the art is really good, but like the overall progression of it, there's something off about it. It could be good, it could be really good if there was like some tweaks here and some tweaks there, maybe focus and streamline down a little bit. Uh, but yeah, I think that's in relatively pleasant company there. And unfortunately, that's gonna put our aggregate ranking for Against the Storm 27th out of 41 games that we've played. I feel like this
It's
might
our
be
new number
something.
one for standard deviation, though.
Yeah,
Most divisive game that we've played so far.
most divisive game since looking through the list,
Cogmine.
Cogmine, which was Will's favorite game. Yeah, I feel like there might be something here where if like a DLC or like a big content patch comes out, it might be worth revisiting. And these scores are not set in stone. They could change. They could change at any time, people. Uh, but it's one of those things that like this game will work for a lot of people. It just didn't work for us today. And I also I was kind of glad for us to cover this early in the year because if we get the bug bitten, I don't know, sometime in the summer or fall and come back to it and it's like a totally different experience, we might change those rankings and it might climb back up our list. So we're giving it an intentional long runway here. I think for similar games, we talked a little bit about the last
Factoria, ever heard of
spell.
it?
Factorio, huh? Frostpunk, I think is similar, but also different in the aspect that's Colin, would you say that's more of like it's not really a board game, but it's more of like your standard city builder experience, right? It's not really
It's a
roguey
little
per
more
se.
purely city building.
Yeah,
You're doing it's like if you didn't have the wood chopping aspect of the glades and you just did the events.
right. Um, to some degree, the city building aspect of Dwarf Fortress is like the only major mainstream comparison that we can kind of draw to. Maybe, I don't know, like the last spell has a lot of similarities. But one game that we haven't really talked about that I think we kind of dance around the topic of like, what if this game was only the city building part and like that was it? Is the game Dot Age or Dotage, I guess, which is a pun on the old guy that you play in the game. That's like it's supposed to be a roguey city builder, and like that's it. Like it's just the city building experience. There's no like outside meta progression. It's just the city, which I think is maybe a more focused experience of what we're looking for. There's a recent game that came out called Roots of Yggdrasil, which I think it might be following in the footsteps of these games that are trying to take the roguiness formula to city builders more generally. I think in a previous episode we talked about Keeper RL, which might be something adjacent to here, and we also talked a little bit about Song of Six, SYX, which
Oh
also might be a thing.
yeah.
Um,
I bought
but
that game and I played a little bit of it and I forgot that it existed.
but Colin,
Should
you've
play that
also
more.
you've played a more beaverific game of Timberborn.
Oh yeah, I mean this is very similar to Timberborn. I feel like Timberborn, Frostpunk, and whatever this game is that we're playing right now, um, they're all very similar.
Uh-huh.
They've got a similar vibe. Like Timberborn even has beavers in it, so there you go. But like they've got a natural disaster you're fighting against, season-based hurtful events. I mean, like Timberborn has like the drought season where it's like all the water goes away, so all your power goes away and all your crops wither and die, and hopefully you stored enough water, or all your little beaver boys are gonna die. Which kind of feels like the storm. Not
One
roguelike
more.
at all in any
Mm,
way. It is a predefined like two or I don't know, maybe it's different now. I played it a while ago, but it was like three predefined maps. And a set progression. And then like when I played it, they really only had one faction, and I know they've added two or three since then. But yeah,
Well, one more that I'll add on here. I'm only adding it in like the similar games grouping as like it's similar in the aspect that it's like the literal exact opposite experience, but it's still I don't know. I'm throwing it in there just for funsies. The app version of Spirit Island, I feel like is Colin's giving me the face. I
No,
think like from what I've
no,
played,
I see it.
yeah, from what I've played of it on the app, it's like what if instead of like you being the bad guy cutting down the forest and like opening up all these bad things that are happening, what if you were the forest like pounding these settlers that were coming into nature with like an iron fist? And it's got randomization elements. It's a board game, obviously. But like to what extent can board games overlap with rogue stuff? I'm just gonna throw it in there for funsies because I played it and I thought it was fun. It reminded me of this game. Um, but for yeah, so that's check out some of those games if you like this. Maybe there's some stay tunes in there. Um, in the meantime, if you want to email us some suggestions of other games that you would like for us to say all devs go to heaven for, you can send those to our email at grogpodzone@gmail.com. You can check out all of our ramblings on Mastodon with grogpod at gamedev.place and our website with all this stuff is grogpod.zone, rankings, and all those good things. Um, that's going to close out this week. But for our next episode, Will, you might have an ace up your sleeve.
Oh yeah, I'm very excited for this one.
Oh,
This is you guys are all in for a real treat. Balatro is just came out literally a week ago. It's not going to be because nothing can actually beat Slay the Spire. I don't think it's actually possible, but it's up there at that level. It's they're they're at least within they're a very short distance of each other, I think.
Balatro, the new hotness. I am shocked that we are playing such a new game. That's wow.
2 new games in a row.
This game got mentioned on like a pretty mainstream Kickstarter themed, some of you might know, podcast. That's how like well known. We're just getting around. This is the new hotness. Ooh, indie game on the rise. And Balatro, what a great name.
Well, Scott suggested it from what, like a Discord for watching roguelites or
Yeah, I think like this was something that was blowing up kind of all over the interspace. And when I had seen people compare it to Slay the Spire, I'm like, yeah, but they compare everything to Slay the Spire. Uh, and to see like the thing that was catching my eye was the concurrent player count and seeing it just like skyrocket upwards. And I'm like, well, this is clearly just a flash in the pan. And it kept growing and like it has this kind of snowball phenomenon. I'm like, all right, well, let's drop it into Will's view and he'll poo-poo it in 5 seconds and that'll be the end of it. And then Will was like, I just played it. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Like, uh-oh, what monster have we unleashed?
it's a thing of beauty. These are happiest times is when you get a great video game going on. And so it's 7 days out, I think. I have 46 hours into the game already. So this
Full-time job.
I should feel ashamed to be honest of this level of enjoying a game, but there it is.
All right, well, join us for our next episode with Balatro, not Balatro. I think it's, I don't know, maybe it is Balatro. I haven't actually looked at any pronunciation guides. That's what it says on Wikipedia anyway. So but anyway, thank you for joining us. And to play us out from this episode, go and grab some biscuits and pie, sit down next to the nice warm hearth, put on some Against the Storm soundtrack, and let's watch the drizzle fall.